right, and welcome to episode 2 of On the Lime. I'm Will.
I'm Kayla.
And this week we sat down with Dr. Corie Morell Martin, who is the Executive Director of Marketing and Public Relations for MedCenter Health.
It's a long title, but I've got to tell you, she is amazing. Corie is one of my best friends, has mentored me for about 5 years now, but an all-around amazing person. She's had a very long career in marketing. She started out working at a newspaper, then went on to be an editor of a food magazine, did marketing in higher education, and now she's in the healthcare sector, so kind of all over the place, but all of that experience has combined to this really impressive outlook on marketing, and I really appreciate all the things that she had to say.
Exactly, and I mean, she also talked so much about, she has been in this industry since the beginning of social media marketing, so she also talked a little bit about the trends she's seen come and go and just the growth of that as a essential tool in a marketer's tool belt.
Mm-hmm. And I also have to put a little plug in for her blog. She didn't mention it in our interview, but I just love it. It's called Fancy Pancake Sunday. Every week, she and her husband, Clinton, make a new type of pancake, and they put it on their blog. They have an Instagram. They have a Facebook page. So if you want to search Fancy Pancake Sunday, check it out, and you will get some delicious pancake ideas.
There's never a problem with pancakes.
No.
True.
Whatever. Have you ever done a podcast before?
I have. I've done a couple of them, and it's been a long time, though. So, of course, there's one that's filmed in my dining room every week. So
yeah.
I observe the Southeastern Trail Runner podcast.
Okay.
Every week.
Oh, wow.
Actually, well, it's me and the other wives/girlfriends observe.
Do you just sit there quietly and sip bourbon and...
Pretty much exactly, yeah. But they're funny. So I used to listen to their podcast when I would go to the gym, and I'd be laughing. So I don't know what the hell they're talking about because they're runners and I don't do the running. But I would laugh so hard I'd have to stop. Mm-hmm. So I can't listen.
You're out of breath on the treadmill.
I'm laughing at their pervy dude jokes and stuff. So I can't. So now I can't listen to them anymore.
That's one of the best things about working here is working with a bunch of guys now that make funny jokes, and I'm constantly laughing all the time.
Oh, that's too kind. Don't egg them on. You don't want to do that.
It's a different environment. It's enjoyable.
Yes.
That's good.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, we like having you as well. So that's
Thanks.
good.
Yeah, she's kind of awesome.
She is. Yeah.
Yeah. So, we
kind of sent you that rundown, or Kayla was nice enough to draft that together.
You did.
But we were kind of thinking, we're trying to keep these a little bit on the shorter side, nothing too crazy in depth, but we also want to give people who might not be familiar with you and kind of an idea of who you are with what we're calling the 3 I statements. Mm-hmm. So, it's just kind of a fun thing to start things off. Do you have anything prepared?
I do. I have kind of personal stuff, but I didn't know if you wanted work stuff or personal stuff.
Let's do personal because we can get into work later.
All right, that's cool.
Let's get personal.
So, I love to cook because that makes other people happy.
Yeah, of course.
Right? So
no one's mad at that.
I know both of you guys like food, and I'm a big foodie as well. Mm-hmm. Always have been. In my former life, I was editor-in-chief of a food magazine in Colorado.
Kayla was telling me about that.
So that was sort of where that started, and got to know a bunch of chefs back then and appreciate the process. So I'm really fascinated with the art, the art of it all. So I like to cook. That's my one. I love bourbon.
Okay.
Because it makes me happy.
There you go.
And again, I'm fascinated with that process too. I'm a transplant Kentuckian. Mm-hmm. So
from where originally?
I grew up in Nashville.
Okay.
But my family is very Italian, upstate New York and South Florida, where they all migrate.
Mm-hmm. I'm from Naples, Florida, and my dad's from Jersey. So.
All right, so you get it then. So that's my people. My people are down there, and we call them the slow roving mass of Italians because they move in mass and slowly. And eat pasta and things. So, so bourbon is a thing in our house. We collect bourbon. We travel to the bourbon trail. We research bourbon. We watch movies about bourbon. We read about bourbon. It's just sort of a fun little hobby for us.
You drink a lot of bourbon.
I drink
not a fair.
Lot. I'm not drinking copious amounts of bourbon, except for when I am. But no. But
now I don't know much about bourbon. But what is your go-to?
Oh gosh,
you always have it in the cabinet on hand.
always on hand. Right now we have Angel's Envy is always on hand, or straight up Woodford. Regular Woodford Reserve is beautiful. I know Kayla likes Bullet.
Bullet is definitely
we do have Bullet right now, and Bullet's a good starter. And what's funny about Bullet is that you start with Bullet and you're like, ooh, this is kind of cool. And their distillery is a really fun tour. If you're ever up in Louisville, it's like you have to drive beyond the outer reaches of Louisville to get there, but it's a really neat distillery. It's very, very different from the rest of them. So it's a cool tour if you ever get a chance to do that.
But Bullet's kind of spiced too, isn't it? It's got like a little bit of spiciness to it.
The Bullet Rye does. The one with the green label, they probably have the best rye. In my opinion, on the market. And it makes a really neat, spicy old fashioned, if that's your thing. The old fashioned is my drink. That's the one.
Yeah. So Dr. Corie Martin here is the one that got me started on the old fashioned. She served old fashions at her wedding.
Awesome.
I made 3 gallons of old fashions, and we served them in one of those huge jugs that you would normally see lemonade in,
of
right?
Course.
One of those big glass jugs. But no, ours had a whole bunch of bourbon in it.
That sounds like a good wedding.
Yeah, I made like 5 gallons of simple syrup or something, and I still have. I just sent some home with Kayla. So yeah, so that's a thing.
Very good.
Awesome.
Yes. So bourbon is a thing. Food is a thing. I just went to this really cool restaurant at the Willett Distillery up in Bardstown. That's a neat little small plates place that was awesome. So when we can mix bourbon and food, that really was, great. And I think the other, I have so many. There's like a lot. Kayla, there's a lot. I'm an observational listener. So
what do you mean by that?
So I think it's sort of not really a skill that you can learn, but you listen with your eyes for things you can't see or can't hear. You listen for things you can't hear. And then you also listen to what people are saying. Because oftentimes, somebody will, let's say you're doing a needs assessment for a client and they don't really know what they don't know what they don't know.
Yeah.
Right. So you're doing a needs assessment for somebody and you can see when they get really excited or passionate about something they do, or you can see when they're really uncomfortable and they're not sure.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't know how to read those signals. So I'm a trained, I've got a couple of communications degrees. So, that really served me well, but more than anything, I'm a trained sociologist. So I study people.
Yeah.
Why people do the things they do, how people do the things they do, motivation, the way different generations communicate with one another. And I have to say, even though I've been doing this going on, goodness, soon it'll be 30 years, about 4 years from now, I guess, about 30 years that I've been in marketing or communication related fields. And I think the thing that has served me the best is to be an observational listener.
Yeah.
And, it's funny because especially in social media, which of course is one of my tenets, but in social media, they call it a listening tool, but I think we're getting back to the more personal type of one-on-one and people talking to people and looking at people when they're doing it.
Yeah.
I think that trend it's funny that we call that a trend. It's just, being a human. This is the way. Isn't there? Are we all Star Wars fans here? This is the way. So
everyone's remembering to be a decent person.
Yes.
Finally.
Yeah. I think that it's generational, certainly. I've got a teenager in my house and it's the most annoying thing in the whole wide world. It really is. But I do think too, being able to be an observational listener, even in my household, helps me read situations. And I think it's really helpful to be able to read people.
Yeah. That's kind of fascinating to hear it worded that way. Cause I feel like I do the same thing subconsciously. And that's why actually I watched some reality TV, but I think I'd watch it from a point of I like Big Brother more than anything because I like to just see how people's minds work and how they decide to manipulate the situations and stuff. And that's just fascinating to me. And I can definitely see how being able to read that stuff would be useful in this industry as well, because know how people want to be interacted with as well.
Yeah, I think it helps. And, I've always told my husband that I'm fascinated with watching him work. He's a photographer.
Yeah.
And I love to just kind of stand back and look at what he's looking at or try to figure out what he's focusing on. And I think that's fascinating to just, like you said, see how the mind works and see why people are, where's it going to go with this next and what is it going to look like when it's finished.
And that's probably what made you love marketing, is because you kind of need to do that in order to perform your job. So it's kind of like a loving what you do kind of thing too.
Yeah. And I as much as I try not to subscribe to the notion that you are what you do, especially if you love it, I mean, it really is a huge part of who I am. And I never called it marketing. And I still really don't feel like I can call it marketing, even though that's what it technically is. Because, when I was in school, marketing was like, it was sales. It was data analysis. And my first job that had a marketing department was working for Gannett for the Tennessean in Nashville. And, they had a marketing department, but they weren't the people putting billboards up. They were the people that were running data and figuring out what's working and what's not working and figuring out circulation in the newspaper and all that jazz. I mean, that was their job. And that's a huge part of it. And it's the part that they're not teaching people how to do right now. So that's the part that I think is missing. I like to go in and rehabilitate organizations, whether it's a small organization or a large organization. You just got to put those pieces of the puzzle together. And because a lot of people have not been trained to do it that way, or have not made it a practice, I think it's something that's not hard for somebody like me who does do that all the time to walk in and do, but it's tough to make people understand why it's important.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So your approach to marketing and your approach to rehabilitating organizations, through a marketing lens, like it is unique than what I've seen other people do. What are some of the biggest mistakes that you see, or maybe not mistakes, but missteps that organizations take, and how would you fix them?
I would say ignoring the data is number one. And I think, every organization has access to data, and people hear the word data and they think numbers, right? Well, it's not necessarily numbers. Any business has a customer. You're marketing a product or a service that is sold to an individual, another business, or something like that. And you know who your customers are. You know how much you sold. You know who you sold it to. You know where they came from. You know what is your most highest in demand product. So why are you not taking those numbers and translating that into marketing campaigns? Because, Coca-Cola sells a lot more than Coca-Cola. And they have products in their line that are probably not selling as well as others, that they market in different ways. They market in different countries that are doing really well in different places. I mean, there's a lot of things that consumers just don't see. So I think ignoring the fact that there's data there, not only on the back end to tell you how well something did, but on the front end, I really believe that if you've done your homework on the front end, your marketing's going to hit.
Yeah.
It's going to work.
Yeah.
Because you did your homework on the front end. You know your audience, you know your message is the right one, your timing is good, your channels are right, everything is in place, everything looks good, it sounds good, people respond to it. And then it does well. And ideally you see an uptick in your sales or an uptick in subscribers or uptick in whatever. It will work if you've done your homework on the front end.
Absolutely. It's so important to do that homework, to develop your strategy, and to do the research, because that's what's going to set you up for success.
Yeah. I think another huge mistake that people do is being reactive in reacting to what their competition is doing. And so going out and putting something out there to try to look better than the other guy, or to try to show, and, instead of telling the stories, and I really do feel like storytelling is a bit of an outgoing trend as well.
Yeah.
Because I think, anything when it's done too much becomes too much.
You glaze over to it. You just
people are just like, I don't really want to hear the story of the dude that came here and did that, whatever. But also I think people want to know what's in it for me. So you have to tell them very, very quickly, very, very, very quickly. And, and that could be, depending on who your audience is, it could be visual, or, in the case of where I work now, I mean, we have audiences of every age range, even quite elderly audience members who don't have social media, don't have mobile devices, don't have access to, to a lot of things that our younger demographics do. So it's a huge challenge, but as a brand, you don't want to put the information out there that you want people to know about you.
Mm-hmm.
You need to put information out that they want. So I think that it's sort of like a twofold misstep that people make is not understanding who their audience is and what they want and what's important to them, but also being reactive.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, my competition did this, so I need to hurry up and do the same thing.
XYZ, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you just waste time chasing your tail doing that.
Yes. And it's tough too if you work in a huge organization that has a lot of administrative red tape. It's really extraordinarily hard to get around that. Even if you're confident that, and sometimes that's where the data will serve you well, is that you've done your homework and you can put that in front of them and say, here, board of directors, this is what the data say, and then and then a lot of time that'll help.
And the data is more or less like on a larger scale doing what you as a person do, through learning through body language and stuff. You're kind of getting to get that inside look on what your customer needs. Is that why you think you subscribe to that?
Yeah, I think I developed a formula over the years that worked for me, and it worked for the individual clients that I had at the time. It worked for the organization that I worked for at that time. And I kind of put some rules into place. And number one, obviously, is know your audience. That is the number one rule of marketing. I don't know if everybody says that. That's what I say. That's what Dr. Martin says. Number one rule of marketing is know your audience. But it's a lot more than understanding who the people are that are walking in the door. You need to understand what motivates them, what's important to them. Do they have kids? Do they not have kids? You can develop formal personas if you need to, which sort of became a hot topic in the last year of developing personas. We did it in some work that we did last year. And for some people, it's probably more helpful than others. I would say developing personas is super helpful for people that aren't trained marketers to remind themselves who they need to talk to.
Yeah.
This is my person. Go back. If you're not talking to that person, then you're not talking to anybody at all. Talk to that person and that person only. And I think that's helpful. But you have to know who the audience is, what's important to them. What are the things that they do with their day? Is it a soccer mom that's not getting home until 8 o'clock at night because she's been at practice with her kids and she's feeding them garbage that she picked up on the way home, and she's exhausted and still has to, when is that person going to have time to actually sit and look and read your message? So I think it depends on who that audience is. So, know your audience, but then secondly, where the data comes in, know your market.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't understand their business. And that could be because they're not privy to the information, especially in larger organizations. They may not be privy to the information that will help them understand there's a strategic plan and this is where we're headed. It's really helpful when you have a strategic plan so that you've got, okay, we're going this direction. This is what we're doing. Mission statements help as much as people say they're garbage, but they really do help. Vision statements help. Those types of things help keep you focused.
Yeah.
And especially in a large organization, which I represent a really large organization now, and those types of things really help keep us grounded.
And you said you've been doing this for, 30 years now?
Oh, gosh, probably about 26 years now, yeah.
In that time period, obviously, social media marketing has become this behemoth, more or less, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
But when you started maybe with Gannett or wherever, that wasn't even a thing that people considered. What has that been like, seeing that develop into this? If you're not advertising with social media marketing, then what are you doing?
Right.
Kind of aspect.
That's such a good question. So I started in print journalism. I was a print journalism major and a communications major. And they called it print journalism back then, and they don't call it that now. News and editorial journalism is just really not really a
MMJ's multimedia journalist.
Yeah, it's like not even anybody can be a journalist. If you got access to a blog and an opinion, you're a journalist. Hey, forget law and ethics. If you've got a marginal following on social media, that's all people need. And so I think that's where the whole fake news phenomenon came from, was all of these jerks with opinions that went out there and spouted whatever, and people believe them. Because why not? Because they have a blog. They have a soapbox. Everybody's got one. It's on the internet, so it must be true. So, so when my goal in life was to be a writer. I was a the high school editor of my high school paper, and I was that nerd. I know Kayla was
Same
too.
here.
Yes, and you know, I mean, it was my dream. I grew up in Nashville, so it was my dream to be a writer. That's what I wanted to do, and it's interesting that I ended up feature writing because, of course, you know, I worked on an advertising team at the paper, and so I did a lot of advertising, a lot of project management around big event advertising platforms, and the internet showed up around that time. And so I was one of the first writers for the online version of the newspaper that we had at that time. And I got to work on that project, which was cool. You know, it wasn't formal, which was kind of nice about it. It didn't play by the same sets of rules, editorial rules and the way that things were written. And I liked that too, because it was more concise.
Yeah.
And more entertaining. So that sort of melded into a love of feature writing. I wrote arts. I had an arts and entertainment column in an entertainment magazine in Colorado when I lived out in Denver. And then I discovered food, and I love the photography, the food styling. I love the chefs. I love what they had to say. I love the beautiful, interesting things that they were doing. And so, you know, writing went into editing, and editing went into project management. And then before you knew it, I was back in Tennessee and Kentucky. And, you know, it just, all of these things just sort of one went into the next, went into the next, went into the next. It was a really nice flow from one career facet to another. And every step that I took along that path, and it took me years, 10, 15 years to get into, you know, social media. I was hired at the university to recruit students using social media, which was unheard of at that time. It was 2008. Wow. Facebook was about, a year or two old at that point. People didn't use it like they use it today. So watching, I'll never forget a friend of mine. I was still living in Nashville before I moved back to Kentucky. And a friend of mine said, "Hey, you got to get on this Facebook thing." And I was like, "Why? I have MySpace." Like, why do I need to get on another thing? I've got MySpace. I don't need anything else. And it's hilarious because since that time, I've made a living on the internet.
Yeah.
I've made a living because of social media and understanding social media when people were afraid of it, when people thought it was a fad.
Yeah.
That was a big one at first. Oh, it's just a fad. And boy, were they wrong. And I think you have to be able to forecast too. You've got to be able to understand the wave of what people are doing. And, you know, people are going to follow the bright, shiny thing. And they do follow the bright, shiny things. So for me, it started because I had moved back to Kentucky and I didn't know anybody. So I connected with some friends from college, and they said, "Hey, would you be interested in being a part of our sorority alumni group?" And I was like, "Sure, okay." I didn't know anybody. That's cool. So they said, "Well, could you create us a Facebook group?" All right. So I created a Facebook group that by the time I was offered the position at the university had hundreds of people in there, and still does.
Yeah.
I don't run it anymore, but that was actually how I got that job, was because of that just random experience. I had web experience.
Yeah.
I had a little bit of social media, and boom, career.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So you've seen like all of these changes within the industry, kind of the good, the bad, the ugly of it. You also see it from a different facet, I'm sure, as a mother to two daughters.
Oh gosh, yeah.
That's not really a realm that either of us have any idea about, as we're both childless right now.
Wow.
What's that like?
Well, I always said that I have two girls. They're almost 15. One will be 15 next week, actually, and one is 12. And I always said that they were at a terrible disadvantage because I was their mom, because I knew so much. I mean, back when Snapchat first became a thing, and of course the spirit behind the original Snapchat was, you know, teenagers or young people that were using it for not so nice things, and because they would self-destruct, you know, like, ooh, something I can do to hide my deviant behavior from my parents. And
great idea.
Yeah, it's just a great move. And, you guys probably hear people in my generation say all the time, we are so glad social media did not exist when we were kids. And that's so true. Yeah. It's so true. But, as a parent, it makes it almost impossible to protect your kids from themselves. Even if you think you're good at it, even if you think you know what they're doing, and if you have a child that is otherwise perfectly behaved, you can't control what other people are doing on the internet. And the things that I see parents doing, and I talk to a lot of middle schools, teachers and groups of kids and, various groups. And one of the things that parents do that they should not do is let kids have social media before the age limit on the social media, first of all.
Yeah.
Just don't do it. Just don't. There are reasons, just don't. And the reasons are not wrong. The other thing that parents do is they let kids sign up for profiles using their real names.
Yeah, that's...
And, my daughter, my 12-year-old, was on a gaming software that's really popular with young kids, and she got harassed by somebody. And it was, she thought it was somebody she knew because he was using the same nickname as a kid at school. And so she thought that this person was somebody she knew. And then before she knew it, this somebody was asking her to be his online girlfriend.
Oh, wow.
And she would have been maybe 10 at the time, 11 at the time. And she was just playing a very, vanilla game that kids, just very, mild, something normal for kids. So, it was a real eye-opener for her. It was an eye-opener for us as parents. And, but I will say, now that I have a high schooler, goodness gracious. First of all, they don't do it right.
No.
They're completely doing it wrong. And that aggravates me. I'm like, what is this snap streak thing that you're talking about? All this? She'll take a picture of her shoulder and send it to 20 people. And I'm just like, what is this? She's like, well, we got to keep the streak going, Mom. Like, this is how you spend your time. And man, if you could only spend that much time on your math homework. But yeah, I mean, it's an enormous, constant challenge. This past year, we bought some software. We subscribed to some software that helps us monitor. That was a really, really good decision.
Yeah.
It was a really good decision. So every family's different, but I couldn't advocate, if even if you don't feel like you should be cautious, you should be cautious.
Definitely. There's just a lot of people out there that can have access to just anybody,
Well, I mean, not only that, but for every account your kid opens, that's a digital footprint that they're never going to remember to go back and delete, and it'll follow them. And who knows, when they start, I mean, everything from identity theft to harassment to bullying, I've seen all of these things with people that I know in my little circle. I've seen all of that and more.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think there's a lot of people that aren't as tech savvy as the three of us sitting here at this table who don't be afraid to ask for help.
Yeah, for sure. So I know that you love social media.
Sometimes.
Wow. I should go ahead and say with that, we are recording this and there's a terrible thunderstorm going on, lots of rain. So you're probably hearing background noise. Apologize. But go on, Kayla.
Sorry about that. We love social media. That's one of the things that we bond over. I always trust your opinion on trends and what's coming next. I'd love to hear your thoughts on what's going to be popular in 2020.
Wow.
Marketing trends on social or just in general.
So, this varies per industry, and it varies depending on who is the one monitoring and using the social platform. But I still think that we are in the age of authenticity right now. People want to know what's real. People want to know the good, the bad, the ugly, and everything in between. And it doesn't necessarily need to be told in a storytelling format.
Yeah.
I think that it's, I was actually having a conversation with somebody about this today. And I said, okay, if you were, sitting on a bench next to somebody, kind of the modern day elevator speech, what would you say? What's the one thing that you would tell people that you really want them to know? And as she started talking and I'm making notes and I read them back to her, she's like, man, we don't have this in any of our brochures. Well, yeah, maybe you should. And maybe we need to talk about that. So I mean, I think considering who, of course, I'm in healthcare now. So we're not only thinking about patients, but we're thinking about their families and the people who love them and people who are making really serious emotional decisions every day. So there is an emotion tied to everything.
Yeah.
There is an emotion tied to buying a bottle of water like I'm holding in my hand because you might like one over the other. Why do you like one over the other? Is one sweeter? Is one not? I mean, people have really strong opinions about things, and people want to be applauded for their opinions instead of berated for their opinions.
Yeah.
So how can you find a way to do that? So I think authenticity and recognizing the individual instead of the huge group of people you're trying to reach out to, but talking as if you're talking to one person. I don't necessarily think that's a trend. I think that's the way it should be done.
Yeah. No, I agree completely.
I just think that's the way it should be done. Facebook is changing the algorithm drastically.
Every day, too.
Every day. Yeah. So, recently they made some changes with, if you're listing a job or a piece of property for sale or something, I imagine they're about to start charging for that. Ads are always changing. You have to pay to play. And that is an unfortunate reality, by getting your message out in the largest, YouTube's the largest platform. But, in getting your message out there in the places where they need to be, it's going to start costing a lot more.
Yeah.
So on the administration side, you ain't getting nothing for free.
Right.
Nope.
You need to be working that into your budget for the next year.
So I just think that being very, very thoughtful and purposeful with the things that you're putting out there instead of just, hey, this month we need to talk about this. Okay. No, I mean, that's just really not how this is going to work anymore. You've got to be really thoughtful. If you're going to spend the time and resources to put a piece of content together that hopefully is a great piece of content, it needs to work for you. And that also goes back to the research part. You should know it's going to work or not.
Yeah, absolutely.
It just kind of to put a bow on everything here. You've gave us a lot of great information on your career and things you've learned, but is there one, and you might have already said it, but is there one like key thing that like is like your key to success, or one thing, even if it's a book you've read at some point that made an impact on you, or just one thing that's kind of your touchstone for your career and just how you see marketing? Or
I have a few, but I'll give you the highlight. So many years ago, when I first started in higher education, I went to a professional conference and I didn't know anybody, and I really admired these people that were speaking because they were like the Yoda of their industry, and they were just like the all-knowing mighty people. And so I went to this leadership seminar, and I sat there with them, and one of them, I don't remember who it was now, but this guy said to me, my best piece of professional advice for you is to find the person who is the absolute best in their field. Get to know that person, become friends with that person, observe that person, work with that person if you can, learn everything you can, and then apply that to your life and pass it on.
Yeah.
So I did that, and I consider myself a fairly ambitious person, but not obnoxiously so. And so, there's a fine line between getting to know somebody and becoming their friend, or kissing up to somebody. Definitely. And people can see through that. So I did make it a point to get to know the key people in that industry at that time, and to learn so much from them, and to be blessed enough to work with them. I mean, goodness, I had so many incredible opportunities during that time in my career. And when I started teaching at the university, that is, I almost always had seniors, and that was a piece of advice that I always passed on to them.
Yeah.
Was don't be shy to ask someone to mentor you, or to make friends with people, or ask people's advice, and don't be shy to network. That's okay.
Yeah.
But don't do it because you're trying to get ahead. Do it because you want to better yourself and to learn. So I think that's important. Somebody also said to me once, listen more than you talk. I'm not real good at that. But I try. But that's a good piece of advice as well that I think people don't put into play that much. But that's a good one too.
Listening is definitely very important.
Yeah, I think people are getting better at it, maybe.
Yeah.
I would like to hope, at least.
Yeah.
Well, and listen for the things that you can't hear.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Corie. I really appreciate it. This has been great.
Thanks for having me, guys.
So that was our talk with Dr. Corie Morell Martin. It was really interesting talking to her because she's been seeing the way that social media marketing has evolved since the early days. And getting her start with journalism back in the days when journalism, TV, and radio were the only things going, and now being able to see that evolve into what it is today.
Yeah, and I really loved what she had to say about authenticity on social media, that it's not a big ploy, it's really just what you should be doing. She's great to work with, and I know that Corie's going to be doing great things at MedCenter Health.
Yeah, definitely. It was great talking to her. In the next episode of On the Lime on February 4th, Tuesday, February 4th, we talked to Tony Rose.
Yes, Tony has been an on-air personality in radio in the Bowling Green area for over 20 years, and we had a good chat with him about marketing yourself, branding, and balancing being a personality with being authentic as well.
And giving back to the community.
Yeah.
When I talk to people about broadcasting now, not just radio, it's like I tell people I do two shows. I do a morning radio show from 6 to 9 a.m. every day, and then I do a 24-hour social media show where you're never really off.
Right.
You know, Kayla, you know that. Well, you know you're never really off the clock.
So that's on the next episode of On the Line.
And remember, if you want those episodes to show up in your feed automatically, you can go ahead and subscribe to On the Line, and you'll get those new episodes every other Tuesday.
And you can follow us on social media as well. We are on Facebook and Twitter at On the Line Pod.
Well, that's this week's episode. Thanks for listening.
Bye.